Before we begin, please note this story is intended for informational and educational purposes. Some scenes have been dramatized for storytelling clarity, but the facts are based on real investigative methods and publicly available reports. Everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Viewer discretion is advised, as this video contains details that may be disturbing to some audiences. Join us as we dive deep into the haunting true story. The gavel drops, but it's not the verdict, it's a confession. In a stunning turn of events, a critical trial is thrown into chaos when the judge, yes, the judge, makes an unexpected admission that sends shockwaves through the courtroom. You won't believe what they said, or the ripple effect it had on the entire case. The air in courtroom 4B was thick enough to be bottled and sold as suspense concentrate. Every polished mahogany surface seemed to hold its breath, reflecting the strained faces of the jury, the press, and the public gallery. This was the final day, the culmination of a 6-week legal battle that had consumed the city's media landscape. The case of the people versus Harrison Crane was more than just a trial. It was a modern morality play unfolding under the unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights. Harrison Crane, a tech mogul accused of orchestrating a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme, sat impassively at the defendant's table, his face a mask of practiced indifference. His fate, and the fate of thousands of investors he had allegedly swindled, rested in the hands of one person. That person was Judge Alastair Thorne. With a mane of silver hair that lent him the air of a Roman senator and a gaze that could dissect a legal argument from 100 paces, Thorne was the embodiment of judicial authority. He had presided over this court for 30 years, his name a byword for integrity, his rulings cited in law schools as paragons of intellectual rigor. His courtroom was his kingdom, a realm of order and reason where emotion was a foreign language and justice was the only law. Today, as he settled into his high-backed leather chair, the weight of expectation seemed to settle upon his shoulders like a familiar robe. The prosecution had laid out a mountain of digital evidence, a complex web of shell corporations, and falsified reports. The defense, in turn, had painted Crane as a visionary scapegoat, a victim of his own ambition and the betrayal of underlings. The closing arguments had been delivered with theatrical flair, leaving the jury to navigate a labyrinth of conflicting narratives. All that remained was for Judge Thorne to deliver his final instructions before they retired to deliberate. The silence was profound, broken only by the nervous rustle of paper and the distant wail of a city siren. Thorne cleared his throat, the sound echoing unnaturally in the hushed chamber. He adjusted his spectacles, his movements precise and deliberate, as they always were. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice a deep baritone that commanded immediate attention. "You have heard the arguments. You have seen the evidence presented by both the prosecution and the defense." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the jury box, making eye contact with each individual juror. It was a classic Thorne maneuver, a way of impressing upon them the gravity of their civic duty. The city expected a conviction. The defense prayed for an acquittal. The law demanded only the truth. It was a routine moment, the prelude to the final act of a long and arduous performance. But then, something shifted. It was almost imperceptible at first, a flicker in the judge's usually unreadable eyes. His gaze lingered for a moment too long on Harrison Crane, a brief, uncharacteristic hesitation that caused the lead prosecutor to shift slightly in his seat. A bead of sweat trickled down the side of Thorne's temple, a detail so out of character that it felt like a crack appearing in a marble statue. He was known for his icy composure, his ability to remain unflappable even in the most heated cross-examinations. But today, a subtle tremor ran through the hand that rested on his stack of legal papers. He picked up his wooden gavel, his knuckles white. The courtroom braced for the familiar sharp rap that would signal the jury's dismissal. Instead, the gavel remained suspended in midair. The silence stretched, becoming taut and uncomfortable. Thorne's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. He seemed to be wrestling with something, a silent, internal battle that was now beginning to manifest physically. His jaw was clenched, his breath coming in shallow bursts. The lead defense attorney, a shrewd woman named Isabella Rossi, leaned forward, her brow furrowed in a mixture of confusion and dawning alarm. Something was fundamentally wrong. The meticulously constructed order of the courtroom was beginning to fray at the edges, and the source of the disruption was the very man sworn to uphold it. Then, the gavel fell. It didn't strike the sound block with its usual crisp authority. It slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the dais with a hollow, pathetic sound that seemed to mock the solemnity of the occasion. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Judge Thorne stared at the fallen gavel as if it were a venomous snake. He brought his hands to his face, his shoulders slumping in a gesture of utter defeat. The mask of judicial impartiality had not just slipped, it had shattered. He began, his voice a choked whisper, a pale imitation of its usual commanding tone. I cannot. The words hung in the air, electric with ambiguity. The jurors exchanged bewildered glances. The court reporter's fingers froze over her stenotype machine. The prosecutor, Daniel Lynn, rose slowly to his feet. Your Honor, he asked, his voice laced with cautious concern. Is everything all right? Perhaps a brief recess is in order? Thorne shook his head, not looking at anyone. He stared at his own hands, splayed on the dark wood of the bench, as if he were seeing them for the first time. A recess will not fix this, he murmured, his voice gaining a strange, resonant clarity. It will not undo what has been done. He lifted his head, and the face he showed the courtroom was one they had never seen before. The senatorial gravitas was gone, replaced by a raw, haunting anguish. His eyes, now glistening with unshed tears, were fixed on Harrison Crane. This trial, this entire proceeding, is a charade. The declaration landed like a physical blow. A cacophony of murmurs erupted from the gallery, quickly silenced by the sharp raps of the bailiff's knuckles on the wooden partitions. Isabella Rossi was on her feet now, her expression a whirlwind of professional shock and tactical calculation. Your Honor, with all due respect, I must object to this line of. But Thorne cut her off, not with a gavel, but with a raised hand that trembled with a terrifying new energy. Your objection is noted, Ms. Rossi, but it is overruled by a higher authority. It is overruled by my conscience. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the kind one takes before plunging into icy water. For the past 6 weeks, I have sat on this bench and listened to testimony about deception, about fraud, about a man who built an empire on a foundation of lies. His gaze bored into Crane, who for the first time looked genuinely unsettled. And I have done so as a hypocrite of the highest order. The courtroom descended into a state of stunned paralysis. The press corps scribbled furiously, their professional detachment warring with sheer disbelief. The jurors looked as if they had been transported into an alternate reality. Judge Thorne, the unassailable pillar of the legal system, was imploding before their very eyes. The prosecution has painted a picture of Mr. Crane as a master manipulator. Thorne continued, his voice cracking with emotion. They have spoken of compromised ethics and a moral compass so broken at points only to greed. He paused, swallowing hard. They could very well have been speaking about me. A new wave of shock washed over the room. What had begun as a bizarre judicial episode was rapidly escalating into a full-blown institutional crisis. Daniel Lynn stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, the meticulously prepared next phase of his legal strategy dissolving into smoke. Harrison Crane, the man whose future hung in the balance, was now just another spectator at the far more compelling trial of Judge Alastair Thorne. 20 years ago, Thorne confessed, his voice now loud and clear, resonating with the painful clarity of a long-suppressed truth. I was a young judge, ambitious, eager to make my mark. He gestured vaguely towards Harrison Crane. A case came before me, a complex patent dispute, a small inventor versus a powerful corporation. The evidence was clear. The inventor was in the right. He looked away, his gaze turning inward, to a memory he had obviously tried to bury for 2 decades. But the corporation had friends, powerful friends, friends who could make or break a career. The implication was chillingly clear. He didn't need to spell it out. The story was as old as power itself. I was offered an incentive, a financial gift, a path to a higher court. All I had to do was find a loophole, a technicality, a reason to rule against the truth that was staring me in the face. The air grew colder. The polished surfaces of the courtroom no longer seemed to gleam. They seemed to absorb the light, reflecting nothing back. The foundation of the entire institution was trembling. If Judge Thorne, the gold standard of integrity, could be bought, then what did that say about the very concept of justice they all purported to serve? "And I did it," he said, the words falling like stones into a silent pool. "I took the money. I betrayed my oath. I destroyed an innocent man's life and his life's work for personal gain. The man who sat where Mr. Crane is sitting now was financially and professionally ruined. And I prospered." He let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "My career flourished. I became the man you all see before you today. Respected, admired, a fraud." He finally turned his full attention back to the jury, his eyes pleading. "How can I ask you to judge this man for his alleged financial crimes, when my own robe is stained with the same sin? How can I instruct you on the letter of the law when I myself have twisted it for profit?" The ripple effect was instantaneous and chaotic. Isabella Rossi, ever the opportunist, was already mentally drafting a motion for a mistrial, her mind racing with the legal precedents for judicial misconduct. Daniel Lynn, on the other hand, looked utterly devastated, as if the very ground beneath his feet had given way. His case, so painstakingly built, was now collateral damage in a decades-old crime. The entire legal system of the city, in that single moment, was thrown into question. If Thorne fell, what other secrets were hidden behind the closed doors of the city's chambers? The confession was no longer just about Harrison Crane or a long-forgotten inventor. It was a contagion, and it was spreading. Every verdict Thorne had ever delivered, every sentence he had ever passed, was now cast under a dark and permanent shadow. The verdict for Harrison Crane was no longer the story. The verdict on the entire justice system was: all visuals and audio elements are used under fair use for commentary and analysis. This story is shared to inform, not to sensationalize. Kindly subscribe to Mystery Arena for more intriguing stories. Here truth isn't hidden, it's uncovered. See you in the next story.